All right, we got some folks rolling in here.
Heck and A.
Heck and a right. Oh man.
Now just your catch a ride though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a ride.
How you guys doing today on this lovely Friday?
You know, living the dream, man. Living the
Yeah.
dream.
Yeah. Live, we're here.
Been a while since we've had the three of us
You.
together. I think
Yeah, been a while since
been a
we
couple
had
months.
you.
I've missed the last two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've definitely needed adult supervision. It's been a whole thing, man. I hope you haven't gone back and watched those other shows.
I haven't yet, but I really want to because I heard there was some good fried chicken talk, and you know that makes my mouth water just saying it. So
Yeah, that did happen. Yeah. Well, it happened and then we couldn't let it go. We'd come back to it even. So yeah.
All right. Do we have the chat enabled for?
Oh, probably not.
Everyone?
Let me get that going.
Okay.
Everyone. There we go. Cool. Hola. We don't have a good thing to talk about. We need to talk about something. What can you do in an orange vest?
Oh yeah, that's great. Anything is the answer.
Apparently anything, yeah.
Anything you want. Get a safety vest on, you can do anything you want.
Yeah. And if you got a white truck to go with that safety vest,
yeah,
sky's
you're a state
the
worker
limit.
now.
State worker. Also, I'm not gonna say how I got these, but I'm sure Pinky, you've seen this. But all of the official Kentucky state vehicles have a big silver sticker on the side of them that's like, official vehicle of the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Yeah.
I've got some of those too. I'm not gonna say
don't know
how
that
I
I
got
would've-
those.
I don't know that I would have admitted to that on camera, man. I'm fairly certain that's a crime.
No, having them is not a crime.
Yeah, using them
legal.
is the crime.
Using them is the crime.
Gotcha. And you would never do that.
I would not. Well, I wouldn't put them on my truck because I wouldn't want the sticker residue on there. But it is kind of a fun novelty.
Well, you got to get the
have around
magnet
house.
version.
Right.
That's what you got to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can get those created. Can I get
probably
some of those
even
to use in Washington?
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
No, you absolutely cannot get those.
Okay. I would never use them here ever.
That's good because
on
I'm
my
not
white truck. Yeah. On the side of my F-150 that would totally look legit. I would never do that.
You would be legit. And you will not get an orange vest to go with that either.
No. On the orange vest, though, I do wonder, so we think about like the birthday cake thing, right? You walk up to the door of any office building with a birthday cake, somebody's going to hold the door open for you, that kind of thing. I wonder if, whether you're coming to talk about an office, is the orange vest still effective? I think it probably is, right? I'm here to work on whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't work in every environment,
Sure.
But it works in a lot for sure.
Yeah. Throw a hard hat on, the orange vest. That's going to work in most places.
Yeah, you're not gonna really get inside the vault of a bank probably with that, but you get pretty close.
Fun fact, if you make a joke about going into the vault of a bank and filling up your pockets and leaving, they won't let you go around the vault anymore. Just for your own knowledge.
Yeah, that is a fun fact. I don't imagine you've ever done that. Never. But...
No, I did. I used to work for some banks and made some jokes because I thought they were funny, and then I didn't get to go there anymore. So...
Yeah. But did you have an orange vest on?
I didn't. That was the problem. I didn't have an orange vest on. Good call.
They probably would have let you go anywhere you wanted near that vault, regardless of your comments at that point.
They did let me haul. I think it was $30,000 in change in my truck, like the bed of my truck, one time because I need to go from one bank to the other. And they're like, "Hey, you're not doing anything. Do this." It's pretty sweet. My truck took curves like a sports car. It was awesome.
Oh yeah.
All that weight on the end. Yeah.
So when we got a snowstorm, did you ever go back and be like, you got any extra coin I can just throw in the bed of my truck for getting around?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it.
Yeah. All right.
I just love the idea of you driving your truck around with $30,000 in coins in your back of your truck, driving like you're in a high-speed chase because it's
Oh
fun.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Can you imagine the mess when I wreck? You know, that
yeah.
would be.
How many
yeah,
police were following you during this exercise? I'm just curious.
None. That was the scary part. Yeah, none. And I was in
Did you
high
feel like
school.
you had
Yeah.
just robbed Scrooge McDuck?
I did. Yeah, I felt a little bit like that. Yeah. Had that moment if I could just keep driving.
Yeah. I could pull over and go for a swim in the bed of my truck in these
Okay.
coins.
That would be an interesting Coinstar trip, though. I'm just saying.
Yeah. It's got the bank's name on the side of the bags. I'm just dumping it in.
Sitting there for like 3 days, just trying to get this 30,000 worth of coin in.
Man, those fees though, you'd only get like 20. So
Yeah. All right.
Man.
Excellent. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Hackle Box. Got the gang back together today and we're already having a good time. So yeah, I will encourage people, like we have some stuff to talk about, but our agenda isn't too heavy. So if you guys have questions or topics or anything to throw in the chat, feel free to do so and we'll try to get to those. So yeah, what have you guys been up to? It's been a couple months for me.
I mean, we had a couple great Hackle Boxes without you where we just kind of ran amok and said whatever we wanted to. There was that. But otherwise, same old. Went to RSA last month, I guess that was now, right? It was interesting. It was fun.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, not my scene, right? As a pen tester type of person, going to something like that is not necessarily always the a fun bag of tricks for me. But I mean, going around and just kind of seeing, what people are up to, seeing what's going on, and looking for, I guess, interesting new things. I mean, the thing about it is, like, going through the expo hall and stuff, you just see, like, I don't know, 56 new EDR, XDR, elemental PRs, you know what I mean? And and all kind of, saying the same stuff, doing the same thing. All of them going to have some new AI, something or other, So it's kind of tough sometimes to wade through it all, but it was good. We met definitely some decent people doing some cool stuff in the spaces for, whether it be like end user education stuff or some, potential partners for kind of different types of compliance related stuff and things like that. It was neat. We had some good conversations with people and saw a lot of the typical stuff that you'd expect. So,
Yeah, the big sale, man. It's like I always feel a little greasy just after being on those floors. I did Gartner last year, and I think kind of similar in that way, especially for the trade show, right? And you're exactly right, man. It's like 25 vendors doing the same damn thing, but everyone trying to prove why they're different than the other 24 in that same space.
Yep. Because they have AI. That's why they're different.
Yeah.
They have the AI.
I actually was expecting to see a lot more like Chat GPT enabled something or other, like I didn't see as much. Yeah. It was brought up as a good point. People prep for that, kind of that trade floor or not trade floor, but that expo floor for quite a while. They probably didn't have enough time to fit that into their new designs, or get new designs made. But next year, hopefully.
Next year for sure.
Oh yeah,
everything. Yeah. It'll be GPT EDR. Like.
So I heard that LastPass had a booth there, and those guys were getting beat up pretty good.
Yeah, I didn't hang around there too much, but I did hear the kind of same thing. It seemed like there's a lot of a decent amount of people kind of just asking those questions, like like asking backhanded type of questions or very loaded questions that were going to be difficult to answer. I feel for those guys. I don't envy their situation,
Yeah, that's like, all right, they have some issues. We've talked about that, but those people working that booth are still probably humans, just like, well, they are just people just like us. And so I feel bad for the guys who probably drew the short straw and they're like, all right, you're the guy who has to go to RSA now, because that had to be a miserable experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's a decent normal conversation too, and I think there's a lot of people who are just like, breaches happen, things are going to happen, and trying to be understanding. So it goes kind of all different directions. There's plenty of other people there trying to advertise their stuff though to overtake them, as well. So whether it be password managers like that or just password solutions in general, but
yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, I just got back. I did Secure 360 and Minneapolis, actually Mystic Lake. It's so hard for me to actually say Mystic Lake, which is a casino up there, for listeners who aren't aware, because we always call it Mistake Lake because every time we go there, mistakes happen. But it was cool. It's good getting to see some of our own peeps and spend some time with them. Got to give a huge shout out to our BDRs for wearing these awesome track suits that they got me one of too. And it was kind of funny. I went to check in when I got there on Wednesday, and the people running the registration booth, when they printed my name tag, they seen I was with the FRSecure, were immediately like, "Oh, you're Oscar? Where's your tracksuit? Where's your tracksuit?" And so I had to tell them I chickened out. I wasn't cool enough to pull it off at the event, but I'm rocking it today. Yeah, it was a fun event. It was cool. Got to see, actually, I had more than a few people come up to me and tell me they were listeners of the Hackle Box. And so if you guys are on here today, thanks for doing that. I really appreciate that. And so that was cool. I got to see some folks too. I hadn't had a chance to see since really Hacks and Hops last October. And so it was neat getting to catch up with them. As with everything, if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. When I was prepping to do my presentation, my display port on my laptop bit the dust. And so I had to do a talk with no slides, which was challenging for me, but also kind of fun because we had some good, colorful interactions, and still got through it. And what are the slides anyway? They're just kind of filler, right? Sometimes we even limit ourselves because of those slides and get really stuck to a narrative because of those slides. So it was kind of fun to step outside that box and just kind of go with the flow. What about you, Pink? You guys have been really, really busy, I know, the IR team, right?
Yeah, I was gonna make the joke that while you guys were out doing fun conferences, been doing work. So yeah, we're busy with 2 Z's, I think is how you put it. So a lot going on. We had a quiet period for a while, and kind of things had died down a little bit, and then they just came roaring back. So lots of cases, lots of varied cases. You know, it's not a one trick pony kind of thing going on, but a little bit of everything right now. It's been it's been a wild couple of months, really. Seems like we've been in the fire for a little while. So yeah, I know all my team is they're tired. You know, if you talk to them and they start saying weird things, just give them.
Oh, we're losing them.
Yeah, I think we're losing the Pink man. I think it was something to say, give him a little bit of grace. I know. Yeah, those guys have been busy, and I think, like you said, the cases have kind of been all over the place as well, Pink, right? So we're not seeing I think he's back, any specific type of pattern here. There's been some BECs, some data leak stuff. I don't know if you guys have any ransom events right now or staging for ransom, but
we've had a couple staging, couple that.
Mustache is interrupting your signal, man.
I think so. It is a beautiful mustache, and all right. So while we wait for Pink to get back, maybe kill your video, Pink, and see if that helps a little bit. I do know one attack that was, something we've talked about on here before was a BEC related to an MFA compromise for just MFA fatigue, right? And so this is something we talk about, why push notifications aren't always the best method for MFA. And I think they have at least an instance or two right now, but we're working with a similar method where essentially somebody blindly approved MFA push notification. The attacker was able to gain access to the system and steal some monies.
I think I'm back. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
All right. Yeah, I had to switch connections here. I'm not sure what's going on. It's like I've got a backup connection and a normal one. Both of them are having trouble. So probably something in the area. But yeah, we've had a couple of those. I had one really interesting one, and I did hear that the mustache is blocking the signal. I caught that before I popped out. It's probably true. Yeah. We did have one that was interesting. It wasn't MFA fatigue type thing, but wasn't your normal like push fatigue. It was a phone call. So it was like we call you with a code thing. And so they got like 2 calls right in a row and basically approved both of them. And so that one was an interesting one. So don't just limit it fully to just your standard push notifications. Keep in mind those phone calls and stuff as well.
Yeah. So kind of another funny thing that happened to us, we're always on high alert here for being possible targets as well. And so we got a call, a few folks on our team got a call last week related to a user who needed access to our messaging center. And so Tyler called me like he had gotten one of these calls, and our initial thought was this is likely a phish because the user and the organization the user work with, like, we don't work with them. I'm not really sure how this relates. And so we kind of listened to this voicemail over and over, and then we started researching the entity and this individual. They gave us a name and an email address, and we couldn't really find anything to verify that they were a user for this organization. So it was a little spooky. But then we started looking at the domain was legit. We looked at the phone number. The phone number was legit, and it was like, let's just give this person a call back and see if they're real, right? And so we call the person back, and it turns out that they are real. And it turns out that they were actually trying to access a website that is called the FRSecure Message Center, which is actually the Federal Reserve. And so Jess K actually did a little recon and showed me this week. She was working with our BDRs who also got the same call. And yeah, 100%. So the Federal Reserve, we just discovered, is hosting their message center, which is called FRSecure. And yeah, so I don't know what we do here, but I think we probably have to give the Federal Reserve a call.
Yeah, I don't expect them to respond gracefully to that. They're just probably going to tell us to leave. Yeah,
but they do print money, so maybe we could settle this outside of court.
Well, we could always call them up and ask them if they need anyone to transport any kind of currency in the back of their truck real fast.
Yeah, got this. Yeah.
We got a guy for it.
Make it happen.
You probably still have that same truck too.
A slightly newer version of it. Yeah. It would fit about the same amount of currency, so it would work.
Fair enough.
I'm gonna start asking that when I'm buying a new truck. Next time I am replacing my truck, and be like, how much currency could you fit in this truck?
I'm talking coin, not paper.
Yeah, talking
coin. Talking coin. Like, will these shocks support the weight of, like, let's say $40,000 in coins?
Oh man! All right.
I do like the idea of the pinky promise segment, though. Just start handing out wisdom.
There's a comment from the chat here that someone has suggested we should have a segment where Pinky provides a fun fact, and we call it the Pinky Promise. That is a fantastic idea, and I think we should do that. Maybe today, Pinky, if you're ready. You don't have to do it right now. We'll talk through our other stuff, but at the end of the show, you can give us the first ever Pinky Promise.
Ooh, I think it was the bank vault thing, but I'll try to come up with another one.
Yeah, well, that one doesn't count because you didn't sign it with the Pinky Promise.
Okay.
So we could use the orange vest. If you have an orange vest, you can do anything. Like Shane said, you can even go to the moon.
Could have.
Pinky Promise, but it's okay. You'll come up with another one.
Went that route. Yeah, it's true. Got it.
All right, so let's talk a security story real quick here. Did you guys see or hear about the Dragos security incident recently?
Yes.
Yes, you did. So for everybody, listening, I guess Dragos is an information security company. I think they mainly focus on ICS, OT space. But essentially, this is a pretty interesting attack for me. Had a new hire, and when they were going through the onboarding process for their new hire, Dragos sent onboarding instructions to the new hire's personal email address, right? And so attackers somehow knew that this individual was a new hire, and they targeted that individual to compromise their personal account. So by gaining access to that user's personal account, they were able to intercept those onboarding instructions and essentially gain access to some systems, not within the Dragos environment. Essentially, I think it was their O365 environment, right? So they were able to get access to SharePoint. Looks like they tried to get into a bunch of other systems. They mentioned like the messaging system, help desk system, customer support, on and on. They weren't able to get into those. The big things, though, they were able to gain access to their SharePoint site as well as their CMS solution. So access to all sorts of customer data and records. And then I think they acted really fast too, right? We see that email was sent, and he was like within 20 minutes, the attacker had gained access to that SharePoint environment, kind of enumerated everything they could get access to. And then they sent an extortion email less than 12 hours later to, I'm not sure, maybe the executives on the Dragos team. And at that point, Dragos discovered the security events, disabled the user, revoked the sessions, and did their own investigation to determine what they had touched and the root cause and so on. So this one is just pretty interesting because they actually targeted a personal email account, intercepted that personal email account to gain access to those Dragos resources.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is an attack of opportunity where they just happen to be living. They already were in there, right? And they saw this thing come through, and they were like, "Wait, let's see what we can do with that." I mean, I don't know. I didn't see any details about like how long the personal account had been compromised or anything like that. But for someone to be able to act that fast on that information, I mean, specifically be like, "Oh, this is going to be a new hire at this company. We want to get in there. Let's go try to attack them all." Be interesting,
I agree.
Yeah, it's
that was
just not knowledge they would have heading into it, unless the Dragos was already compromised, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think of like a couple options, right? One is like Pinky, that was my gut. If this was targeted, then Dragos is likely compromised elsewhere that they haven't disclosed or unaware of at this point, because it would have had to have some sort of insight into that new hire. Or, I mean, the other thing is like, people are super chatty on LinkedIn, right? And so what are the chances that this new employee's on LinkedIn and says, I just got accepted or offered this position with Dragos, I'm going to start in 4 weeks from now. And so there was a little bit of a dwell time for attackers to say, oh, cool, let's go target this guy's personal accounts, see if we can gain access and intercept that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like I said, I mean, I really think that it makes more sense that he just ordered it was compromised. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they see how this come in. But either way, it is interesting. The first time I read it through, I honestly thought it was that their new account that had been like provisioned for them got hacked. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, because people use the stupidest passwords for provisioning new employees. And it's the reason when we're doing password sprays, we do like, the normal stuff that you'd expect. And then you start hitting those like welcome 1, 2, 3s, hoping to hit some new provisioned account that hasn't been changed yet, and you do see a ton of that. Honestly, especially with companies that are large enough. I don't know how big Dragos is, but with large companies, you'll see a decent amount of, you can get hits on people's, with the new hires before those accounts have really been used and their passwords have been changed, And so now if they have it configured right, because we've gotten into some of those in pen tests and stuff, and if they have it configured right, what happens though, as soon as you get into it, it does at least make you change the password, which can throw some wrenches in, as far as like, it's more likely that they're going to detect that you did this, because that new employee is going to be like, I can't get into my account that you sent me. So you're going to get detected. You can't dwell for too long on it, but it is a thing for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting vector. I mean, it's kind of a neat one. It seems a little novel, kind of like we're saying here, but certainly something to be on the lookout for, because realistically, we've talked about it before, the bar for like an insider threat attack is pretty high. Like, we want to see a lot of information before we think it's an insider. And this is not truly an insider, but it's an inside account. So it would probably look pretty easily in a lot of cases, except for like, what Eric's talking about.
Speaking of interesting things, and this isn't on our agenda for today, but our agenda's pretty light anyway. Last month we had talked about, what was that, 3CX, or that supply chain breach that happened?
Yeah, the phone.
Yeah, and at the time when we were talking about it, we weren't exactly sure. They were still investigating like how it all came about. I just thought it was interesting, kind of following up on that later on, that they found that came from another supply chain thing. So there was like, it was essentially someone had been breached, had stuff, malware inserted into their software. Then one of the employees from 3CX downloaded and installed that software, and then they got into 3CX and did the same thing. So it was like a double supply chain attack, essentially, at the end of the day. A supply chain attack that led to a supply chain attack, which I think is at least novel as far as the news goes. So I thought that was really, I guess, just neat from that perspective. It's not surprising, but it's I think one of the things you haven't heard too much about, the supply chain attack leading to another one. So
yeah, so who was the downstream or the upstream
it was
attack?
See, that's the thing is I hate talking about it because then I don't have it prepared. But it was something about like some trader thing. I can't remember now. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Oh yeah, some stock trade thing.
Yeah. Yep. It was
I remember seeing this. Can't remember the name though.
Yeah, so X Trader from Trading Technologies. So they had a tampered installer for that, and so the person had downloaded and installed X Trader, and then that's how they got into the 3CX and then compromised 3CX and ended up doing that. So it was interesting.
Very interesting.
Well, now I've got more tabletop material, right? I use the supply chain and the fake Notepad++ and things like that a lot. Now it's like, yeah, Notepad++ was compromised before because of another attack. Yeah, it's sweet.
Kind of going back to the Dragos thing though, the one thing that came to mind when I was thinking about this is like the onboarding process, right? And so if you're relying on your onboarding process like to be purely through email communications, that seems like a flaw here. And not that the entire process, I'm sure, is just through digital communications, but I think especially when we're at that point of handing off instructions for gaining access to your email system, your CMS system, you need some human intervention there, right? Making sure you're talking to the person on the other end of that wire that you expect before you deliver those things, because it's a big deal. I mean, and I think a lot of companies probably use this. What's your personal email? We're going to communicate it through there primarily during this onboarding process, and they probably share some information that shouldn't be sent outside of that internal ecosphere. And so, yeah, I mean, what do we think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Definitely need some kind of human interaction there. Can be tough, I mean, but at least a phone call, that kind of thing. At least you're speaking to the person at the other end of that number generally without something crazy kind of happening. So I definitely agree with that. Something that it's kind of one of the like you're talking about here. It's kind of one of the new challenges with just a lot more folks working from home and that kind of thing. And we've talked through some of that in the past, but a new wrinkle in that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I'm curious on that too, on this, the whole, they call out in this, information that they kind of released, they call out all the different things and they try to get into, but they couldn't because of role-based access controls, right? Which is like good. Let's call that out. It seems like they've got their infrastructure pretty, well defined as far as what access people should have, things like that. And this new person coming in shouldn't have access to all those things. We know a lot of organizations we've either heard of or dealt with or whatever that might be the case, that they once you get under their SharePoint, it's like you have access to everything, right? It seems like they had a pretty good access controls in place. But I'm curious how much of this too was like they would have gotten there with some level of interaction or some other kind of level of if they didn't try to ransom them essentially, right? I mean, not ransomware, but whatever, extort them after 11 hours, would they have gotten access to more things? Were they just too hasty? What was the situation there, of the provisioning of the account,
And that again too makes me wonder, like with your theory, Eric, like they just got lucky because of how fast they went to extortion, right? I mean, how long could they have dwelt? And it's like you mentioned too, there is going to be a short life on how long those new creds are going to last, but 11 hours, it's pretty quick, man.
You could have they could have dwelled longer for sure, and they could have waited out more. It does feel like one of those, like, situations where it's attack for opportunity and they were just like, get as much as we can because we don't know how long this is going to last, and then okay, this is what we got.
Right.
I know there in the article they talked
too.
Go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
Keep going.
No,
okay,
I love
all right,
you more.
I'll take it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was just going to say, it kind of makes sense too when we think about attack groups, right? They generally sort of specialize, right? You've got ransomware groups, you've got BEC groups, that kind of thing, right? This is probably an email compromise attacker. They don't have the skills to or the knowledge to kind of move around and escalate and do that kind of thing. Yeah. So they were just like, hey, we got a thing, and this is a well-known security company. I bet they'll pay us to not say that, we got you, kind of thing.
Yeah, my guess too is that if they had been sophisticated enough and been like actually paying attention and seeing that this person had announced they were going to be working there and going in and trying to attack that account, doing all that, I feel like they would have been a lot more prepared for what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. So Yeah. We did get a question from an anonymous attendee asking how often I get mistaken for Kevin Owens when I'm in public. The world will never know because I don't go in public. I honestly didn't know who Kevin Owens was. I had to Google it real fast, and then I was like, damn it, I don't like that. But fair enough. And I'm now going to look in the mirror and mistake myself for Kevin Owens. So
that was hilarious. I seen you smiling, and I'm like, what's Eric smiling about? And then I seen the question, and then I Googled Kevin Owens, and I'm like, holy crap, that looks like Eric.
Yeah, I'm a little lighter weight than that, but not much. So yeah,
I'll give you that.
Out. That said, it's never happened. I've been mistaken for a lot of people, but never has anyone ever asked me if I was Kevin Owens. I generally get mistaken for people when I'm like out at DEF CON and stuff. I had like last year, I was walking around and was it last year? I think I was walking around in my kilt and various things and had my mohawk and everything. And someone walked up and they started talking to me like they knew me. And I was like, no, I must be the other guy here with a kilt and a mohawk. You know, I don't know what to say. I'm not the guy you think I am. And they were like convinced I was. And then they were very embarrassed after that. So
I will say, though, if there's one place where it is possible there could be two guys with a rainbow mohawk and a kilt, it's DEF CON. Yeah,
it's DEF CON. No, I didn't. No part of me was upset with them. I was like, I get it. It's a thing.
Oh, man. Great question. Fire some more in there. I will say, too, on the Dragos thing before we move on, like the only thing I would think about if there are any Dragos listeners or clients of Dragos who are listening here today is like, they got their CMS, so they have all their customer records, at least to the point they know who Dragos likely works with. They know what type of engagements they have with Dragos, and that will be very valuable information for future social engineering attacks. So I would expect their clients will see that, and I'm hoping too that Dragos is being proactive. I will say that it seems like they were very public about what happened. They've been very open with sharing the information they have, and so I would hopefully assume that they are following up with their clients. It's just one of those future inevitable social engineering attacks.
Yeah, I was pumped to see how open they were about it and transparent about it. It's really really nice to see because we're not seeing a lot of that right now.
Yeah, kudos to them too. They're a security company. That is what they should do. So I'm happy to see someone do the right thing. I think another topic maybe we're going to hit on, we did have an email come in from a listener who
Hey, can I stop you there real quick?
Oh, yeah.
I want to get to that one, but I think that was a decent enough segue for about the MSP discussion we were having earlier.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You fire away. I got to plug my headset in here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this was just one that Oscar and I were talking about because it's like I said, there's not a lot of transparency out there right now with a lot of attacks that are going on, things like that. And so at an extremely high level, we'll just leave it at that. But if you guys work with an MSP, managed service provider, managed security service provider, those types of organizations, right? People who do like IT work for you, that kind of thing. May not be the worst idea just to go Google their name, look for news articles, look for any recent breaches, that kind of thing, just to make sure that you kind of know what's going on out there. Because even when these things get announced to, Bleeping Computer or wherever, sometimes they're not informing their customers that they had an attack. Just kind of out there, and they hope you're going to find it. Well, they hope you're not going to find it, most likely. But just a more of a PSA here, just to go look for those things. I mean, if you do have an MSP, someone that you use that has been breached recently, put a little extra scrutiny on them. Ask them what happened. See if you can get some IOC lists, that kind of thing, extra things for you to look out for in your environment. Because we do know, I mean, you think about like the 3CX thing that we talked about, some of the goal there was likely to hit this company and then pivot outward to the client companies. And a lot of times we have, VPNs set up for these companies and credentials that live on your environment and different things like that. So just everyone go take a look at any of those folks you use right now and see if they've had anything in the news. And that's a good practice just in general, always. But, take a look at that.
Yeah, good PSA. And in general, even if you haven't seen anything in the news too, because I think we're learning that some folks don't do the right thing. So we're talking about and publicly disclosing these security incidents. And so it's okay too to just put your MSP under a little bit of scrutiny. They have hooks in your environment, access to your environment, and you should feel confident about their access and that they are properly securing their own environment and that they are properly sharing any information with you that should be relevant to your organization. So even if you don't see them in the news, maybe worthwhile to engage your MSP and just say, have we had any non-disclosed incidents in the last 12 months? If so, request that information, just like Pinky said, so you can make sure that you have those indicators of compromise, you can apply those to your environment and make sure that you're limiting the opportunity or the likelihood for that attack to transition into your environment.
Yep. Absolutely.
Anything else on that one, Pink?
I don't think so. I think that's probably about it. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure people can Google and see. I don't want to call anyone out here specifically,
No.
right?
It's not anyone in particular, right? It's
right.
happened a few times recently,
right.
which is kind of why we're talking about it.
Yeah, we've seen a few, and we've heard too that those providers haven't been as forthcoming as they should be with their clients, and so that's unfortunate. But like Jennifer said, trust but verify here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as far as not being forthcoming too, like one of the things that has become a challenge with a lot of this stuff is they may go ahead and tell you about it, but it may be 3 months later. Maybe you had an outage, something like that. If you had an outage that was unexplained, they don't have a good answer for that. Press them on that, find out what that outage was about. Just different little things like that. Just keep an eye on them.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Like Brian says in the chat, MSP should always be scrutinized. I mean, and not that there's not a lot of MSPs doing great work out there, but the reality is just the access they have into your environment. You have to think about that. And, we see cases too, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, right, where folks have switched MSPs and they leave the tool sets of the old MSPs in that environment. And we see that those tool sets get compromised because that MSP is compromised and they're able to gain access through an old MSP and further cause damage. So it's always good to make sure that you understand what tools are deployed in your environment, that you're properly sanitizing those systems when those tools aren't in use, and even having this conversation with your current MSPs, because we see that where the MSPs may change their tool sets, but they're not always really good at cleaning up those old tool sets that have active access to the systems in your environment. So there's a few angles here to think about. So yeah.
You should have a, accurate and asset inventory is what you're trying to say. Software asset inventory.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, you don't want our team coming in and going, "Hey, do you guys use TeamViewer?" And then being like, "Well, we did 5 years ago with this other MSP." Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
it's still on all your systems, and we can still see it's connecting to your old MSP. So let's clean that up. Yeah. I think we got Brian fired up in the chat here.
I think we did. Yeah, that's what I was just looking at. Yeah, way to go, Brian.
We need a guest host all of a sudden.
Yeah, we just tag him in. Kevin Owens, tag him in, baby.
Tag him in.
Tag him in.
Yeah, so we did have a request got an email this week of someone who's a listener and was just curious. I think they're looking at implementing a SIEM solution in their own environment. And the intention is to have manageable logs that are usable. Excellent. And so they wanted to see if we could discuss some pointers. What makes a SIEM solution good? What are the advantages or disadvantages of not having one or having one? And what are some implementation best practices? You want to start, Pink?
I think I'm going to tag Eric because I want to know what catches you guys a lot of times, like as far as SIEMs go. Like what are some just high level things that you guys get caught for in SIEMs, that kind of thing?
Well, that's a tough one to say. Honestly, I don't know so much that it's what catches us is when people have, I'd say, good baselining. They understand their environment well, and they actually are able to notice blips, right? Notice changes in what's happening in logs or in accesses or different things. I couldn't necessarily name a specific thing that's being captured, but I can at least call that out as a specific thing. I have seen many people who have tons of information logging in their SIEM, but they're just not noticing anything different because they haven't baselined it. They don't understand their environment well enough to even know if anything's out of the ordinary or alert on those things or anything like that. So I can more talk to the the mistakes I've seen people make, right? And that's that kind of thing. I remember one time, this was however many years ago now, but I was working with a client. It's always great for me when we're working with a client who cares, right? And they want to dig into and understand things. We had finished up a internal penetration test, and we had, kind of been living out of a few machines, and they had all this logging around access over, SMB and all these different things, right? And they came, they logged on. We jumped on another meeting after the delivery. They shared screen. They went into their SIEM, and they were looking and showing all this stuff. And they're like, how would I notice that this was happening? Because it was like things that should have been very, very loud, very noisy. Like the idea of me taking because at the end of our pen tests, or red teams for pen tests will oftentimes be extremely noisy, just to kind of try to see what people catch. And it'll be a situation where it's like, yeah, we attempted to, remotely compromise over SMB, like with PSExec type thing, like 50 hosts, like boom, all at once, right? And it didn't get seen. Why? They started looking at that stuff, and they're just like, well, how would we have noticed that when these hosts, these file servers, these things are generating this many connections constantly? Like, it's thousands are coming out of that. How would we notice 50? It's like, because you've got to baseline things, you got to figure out, like, what does that actually look like, and fine, your file servers are having all of this, but what about the rest of the hosts, and when are they receiving connections over SMB? Who cares that it came from the file server? Is your file server constantly initiating connections out to other people? I get that, like, there's a lot of traffic on those ports and stuff, but you got to be able to, like, actually figure out and do that. So I think it's the important thing is that no matter what you're logging, you need to understand what logs are normal and what are not, and how you can kind of differentiate between that. And it's a tough thing to do, but it's the most important thing. You can implement any kind of logging in the world, and if you don't know how to actually read that log, it doesn't matter.
Yep. That's why I tagged Eric, because I thought you would have kind of that response to it. And yeah, and I totally agree with that. That is one of the bigger things that we see when we're working incidents and folks have a SIEM, because security folks for years have been saying, hey, get a SIEM, do something, do some kind of log aggregation and correlation, and still totally agree with that. But we've had several cases where some folks say, yeah, we bought Darktrace or whatever, and we popped it in the environment and then never touched it. And so having that baseline, understanding what looks normal, and then setting up some alerts, because that's the big thing there, right? Is if you're just looking through that traffic, it is difficult to sift through sometimes, right? But if you've got, if you have a way to kind of normalize that, get your baselines established, and say, okay, anything outside of this, let's at least get some kind of an alert on it. Sure, you're going to deal with some false positives, but that's okay. But like Eric said there too, right? You see a lot of connections, SMB connections coming into a file server. You probably don't see that many going into a workstation. So, group these things up. Hey, this group gets this policy. If we see SMB connections here, if we see a reference to PSExec, something like that, throw an alert. Let's take a look at it and go from there. The other big one that problems for folks are searchability, right? And so definitely, like Oscar said, want to applaud the listener who sent this in. It's like, hey, we want something more readable. Some systems are better than others when it comes to that searchability. I'm not going to call out any specific names, because I'm sure some of it is just in training and tuning and that kind of thing. But if you've got one that's just kind of a blob of data and you don't have a good way to search through that, or it's a really complicated query language that you're not used to or you can't figure out easily, that's been a big one. There is one in particular that I would almost call out on that, but I can't remember the name of it right now. But there was one where it was its own query language. It didn't match up to like Splunk, Wireshark, different things like that. They're pretty standardized in how those query languages work. If you can use one, you can generally pivot over to the other and figure that out. Some of them are just awful for that. So look for searchability and ask for a test drive before you implement this thing. Get a demo in, feed it some data, that kind of thing, try that out. And then also too, like, pay attention to what types of data you can get in there and how it correlates those, and ask these questions when you're doing that, right? Can it handle firewall, server, workstation, security tool, all this stuff? Probably most of them can ingest that kind of stuff, but then I'll also talk to them about, well, how does it correlate that? Does it draw any kind of patterns, any kind of path between these things? Because oftentimes when we're doing an investigation, we're going to find a single indicator, like on a server event log, and then we start following that path back and, eventually to the firewall, that kind of thing. And sometimes that takes a lot of time to kind of figure that out and line up the times, because some things report in UTC, some things are in EST, some things are in a time zone you're not in. So, make sure all that stuff gets lined up. But then also too, your SIEM should give you the ability to kind of tie those things together and make a package of data that makes sense, because it's not just one event, it's multiple events to get to that point, that kind of thing. Those would be the other big ones I would throw out there.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. You guys touched on a whole lot there, for sure. But so, like, if we start here, what makes a SIEM what makes this a good SIEM solution, right? So, and I think you guys answered this. I'm gonna try to step through their questions. I'm sorry. And so I think we agree, right? Usability is a big one, right? Making sure you're comfortable with the interface, you can learn the query language, you're going to be able to properly analyze your data, right? Another big point is the ingestion and making sure that your SIEM can properly ingest all the different data sources in your environment. And it is different. I mean, some SIEMs are very flexible in what they can ingest and some aren't. So making sure you have something that can give you good coverage and visibility throughout your environment. Another point I think that you guys probably would have got to is storage and understanding retention, because I do see some cloud-based SIEM solutions or, off-the-shelf SIEM solutions that have a very limited storage amount unless you pay tons and tons of dollars to get that. You want retention, because that's often, or as much as we want to be able to identify these attacks as they're happening, a lot of times it's going to be post-fact, and it could be significantly post-fact if there was a long dwell time. And so having a large blob of that SIEM data for 12 months or more is going to be ideal. And then making sure you have unification. Like, I think this is what Pinky was getting to. All your timestamps have to match. If you're not using an atomic time source and you're feeding your SIEM, when you go to actually hunt in that SIEM, it's going to be a nightmare for anyone to do true investigations if you don't have good time syncing across the implementation. And then furthermore, so that's, I think, the main points I would think about for a good solution. But then it's right into what Eric was saying there. You have to, once you implement all these data sets, like, I will say, you're going to be in a better position just having the SIEM than not having the SIEM. So if there is an incident, you have that retention, we can go back in time and analyze that data. But if you want to get the true value out of your SIEM, it's all about what you guys are alluding to, normalizing your environment so you can identify evil when evil occurs, and being able to properly set up and tune those alerts, making sure your team knows how to investigate those alerts, and really get some value out of the active monitoring piece of the SIEM. And the normalization phase is tough. I will say that. I've worked through some SIEM implementations, and I think this is why a lot of people fail at that point. They get really good at feeding all the data, and we see this a lot. I'm sure you guys see it. We're like, yeah, we got the Splunk instance, and we're feeding everything in there, and we're storing that for 12 months. How are you using it day to day? Kind of not. We just have a blob of data. Well, from an investigation standpoint, that's awesome. We can go get to that, but like, you're kind of wasting money there, because there's a lot more power that you can get in defending your environment if you properly tune that SIEM.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, totally agree with that. See, we did have a question here too. Questions essentially, it's from Eric, and it's really what a honeypot versus a SIEM, and so definitely two different animals. So your honeypot is more about detecting attacks and getting a feel for like what's happening, that kind of thing. There's a lot of different ways to use a honeypot. I'm thinking about it in our terms, where we throw a honeypot out there and just see what's hitting it, that kind of thing. There's another fun fact I might be able to throw in here in a minute about our honeypot that we stood up. But the SIEM is more, collecting those events, correlating and aggregating that data, getting it all in one spot so that you can see all that kind of thing. So you're not having to go through it and pull up this event log, look through it, pull up another event log over here, look through that, try to find some pointers, and then go to a firewall log and try to match it all up. Get that data together and having the ability to alert on certain conditions there. Whereas the honeypot's more about seeing things that are happening and getting a kind of a like TTPs or IOCs, that kind of thing, from your honeypot.
Yeah, the easiest way I think to think about is Eric's example, right? When you were talking to your red team engagement, where you had a file server that attempted to initiate SMB connections to 50 servers at the same time, right? Outbound. And so your SIEM would catch that, right? Where maybe that honeypot was a target, it would only be one of those 50, and you may not understand, like, oh, they were just trying to initiate these connections to a large volume of systems in my environment. So The honeypot is valuable, I will say that, but it's a
Oh, yeah.
different kind of value, right? The SIEM
Yeah.
is more, let me get visibility into what's actually happening in real time through all of my data sets in my environment, right? So we're looking at Windows event logs, all the Windows system logs, looking at your device logs, your EDR logs, or your alphabet soup logs, right? And we're feeding all those into one source, so that we can have a true correlated, complete vision of your environment instead of isolated by unique pieces one at a time.
Yeah, I will say on the honeypot or different types of canaries and stuff in general, things to alert you when they get touched, right? That does catch us. I mean, to answer Pinky's original question, I mean, like what in a SIEM is catching you? It all depends on how they tuned it and how they're detecting things and stuff. But honeypots and stuff and things like that do catch a decent amount of stuff. They're especially good for certain types of things, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, like both, right? Why not both?
Yeah.
Because like was already said, I mean, a honeypot's not going to help you with an investigation in your environment. But the SIEM will. Honeypot will just alert you that might be something's going on. And we see it in, like I've worked with people, that's how they detect when Kerber roasting attacks happen, right? Because there's SPNs that are associated with hashes that literally these machines never get used, these service accounts never get used. So as soon as it gets touched, as soon as anybody's trying to authenticate with it or do any kind of ticket granting with it, it immediately flags and hey, someone's doing something in the environment. Now you could find that with data in other ways too, but it's a good way to immediately catch that happened. File access type things too, where it's just like people do that all the time. But what I mean, that's one of the detection methods for ransomwares, right? Or like encryptors, right? Is that you put files on there, and if they get touched, they get access in the first place, something's going on, they shouldn't be getting touched, right? And so they're great for certain types of detection. By all means, I do think that a lot of successful environments that I like, organizations, their environments have included those types of things, and I think they're very, very good at immediately raising the flag and letting you know that something's going on. But you're still going to want the SIEM to then investigate, to look through logs, to get more details about where else it hit, not just your honeypot, what else was going on associated with that. So you can't just, it's not a one or the other.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that.
Those canary files, for any of you all out there who use some EDR technology, if you go look in your folder structure on your machine right now, you're probably going to see a bunch of kind of strange XLS doc, PDF type files with a strange name. And those are your canary files for those EDR tools. Certainly freaked us out the first time we saw those in an investigation, because they look like they've been ransomed. But yeah, most of the EDR, XDR, like the alphabet soup, I hate all of the acronyms. But your detection tool, most of them have that employed now. It's a really nice feature.
Yep. So the other question was, what are the advantages or disadvantages of having or not having a SIEM? I think we kind of covered that, but I will say in summary, regardless, if you have the SIEM, you're going to be in better shape than if you don't have a SIEM. Now, considering that even if you don't have all your data points in that SIEM, if you have retention of the data that's feeding in that SIEM for a significant period of time, that's a step in the right direction. I'm not saying it's perfect, right? But if you're at least dumping logs somewhere, you're not even looking at those logs and you're storing them for a long period of time. Like I said, if you have that incident, you have somebody come in, that you're going to be 5 steps ahead of the person who doesn't have that technology. Would you guys agree with that?
To an extent, I will say make sure you're feeding it. So I do want to be clear about that. Not just having the SIEM and popping that in there. Not always a great thing. I think Oscar remembers the Google box that we plugged in a data center years ago at an old job, that they were like, hey, we got a Google box. It's in the data center. It didn't do anything. It was just there for show. So don't do that. Make sure you're feeding it, and feed it as much as you can. That you have storage for and that kind of thing.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, and I think we covered all the implementation best practices. I don't know if you guys have anything else, but hopefully that was valuable for our listeners and our listener who requested this. Feed us more stuff like this, because we do like hearing from you all and challenges you have and things you're trying to solve, and we'll give our best advice. And usually it's pretty heckin' good, right, Eric?
Heckin' ain't right. And also to answer the question, Reese's.
Reese's. That's a Reese's.
It is a man name or a woman named Reese. It's their cup though. It's Reese's cup.
Yeah.
Reese's.
Reese's.
Yeah, Reese's.
It's not Reese's.
Yeah. So the question for people who will listen to this later, an audio only, is: do you verbally call the candy Reese's or Reese's? But you know what though? I just realized this as I said this. If it's a peanut butter cup, I call it a Reese's peanut butter cup. If it's Reese's Pieces, I call it Reese's Pieces.
Well, it's Reese's Pieces. It's a playful name. You don't actually think it's pronounced that way. It's just you're being playful. Like, give me some of them Reese's, buddy. You know, it's more like that. You know,
right.
I was just thinking though, if I use cup in it, right, I do often say it's Reese's cup, like Reese's cup. If I'm just talking about it, it's Reese's. It's the weird thing. Adding the word there changes it for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Tyler, for breaking our brain with that question. Now I don't know what I said. Yeah, and Amanda asked if I was supposed to wear this jacket Wednesday. I was. You may have missed it early on. I chickened out and wore it today instead. But I had a real nice, like Western style pearl snap button, you know, that I'd brought for the talk already. And I mean, it's hard not to wear a real nice pearl snap, right?
This is true. It's a fact,
but it makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
I don't know, man. You get a good one. It's a whole new world. I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you can spend a little on them though. You can't just get the cheapo ones. They're not as good.
Agreed. And this one was real nice too. It had a little microfiber on the inside of the bottom shirt to clean your glasses as well, which is so nice. All right,
that alone sold me.
Right? Heck yeah! All right. Anything else before we close?
I'll give you a Pinky's promise.
All right. Yes.
Fun fact, and I'll relate it back to what we were talking about earlier. The fun fact is that there are 293 ways to make change from $1. Pinky's promise.
All right. Pinky's promise. 293.
It was a fun fact. I don't know.
Make change from $1.
Yeah,
that's right.
Perfect. Nailed it.
That's great.
All right, that'll do it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next month. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.